What we like to do as human beings is look for patterns. Our brains are pretty good at looking for patterns and finding them, sometimes when they aren't there. This makes our life on this planet so much easier because if you have to think about every single thing in isolation, you wouldn't get anything done. It would be very hard to just function as a normal human being. So we rely on this pattern recognition system that we have. It's called our brain, and it's really good at that and tends to, as a whole, it tends to work quite well. There are advantages to that and disadvantages. The advantages, like I just said, you function so much better as a human because otherwise you would have to overthink basically every single action. Now, in particular, when it comes to violence, this is important because, as I've mentioned many times in the past, when it comes to violence, it's all about time. You have very little time. Time compresses. That means that when the punches and the kicks are flying at your face, time is measured in microseconds, meaning that punch can come at you at a very high rate of speed and you have to act immediately. Now, sometimes it doesn't have to be just a punch, it can be somebody kicking you, striking you, using a knife or a stick or what have you, and all that happens very, very fast. So if you have to think about what you have to do next, it's going to be quite hard for you to effectively defend yourself. Now, it gets more complicated, I know. I'm not going to get into all those details, but as a general principle, I think it stands that time is very, very micromanaged or needs to be micromanaged when you are forced to defend yourself. You don't want to waste any time. The other side of that coin is that relying too much on recognizing patterns, it can get you in trouble as well. Now, the reason why I give all that explanation here is not that long ago in the Facebook group, and I'll put a link in the show notes directly to the video. See a video of this one guy. It looks like there's some sort of social dynamic that went wrong. Could be a dominance display, could be a variety of reasons, but it's for sure not criminal violence. What happens is that this guy is very angry at somebody in the street. He's yelling and shouting. He at one point takes his shirt off, pulls it over his head, throws it to the ground, starts jumping up and down. And most of you with some experience, you recognize this behavior. And at one point, the guy kicks this small iron gate with this wireframe decorative iron gate, and he kicks it. I guess he wanted to impress the other guy. The only issue with it is that he gets his foot stuck in that gate and he falls to the ground. It's pretty much where the video ends. Now, let's look at that. You can look at it from both sides. Let's look at it from the side of the guy who is clearly being aggressive. Many people, when it comes to this kind of dominance display and, let's say, interpersonal violence, so it's not somebody trying to rob you or do some sort of criminal activity. There's an argument that breaks out. Could be as silly as somebody bumping into you and both sides refuse to apologize. Could be something else, but we've all seen this kind of stuff. If you end up doing that kind of violence a lot, actively engaging in it because that's just who you are, or that's the life you lead, well, you can quickly figure out that in some cases, I'm not going to say in all of them, but in many cases probably, acting like that tends to get you what you want. Whether that is for the other person to back down or so that you can intimidate them enough so you can hit the first, land the first strike and hit the guy, and then you never give him the opportunity to recover from that, and you quote unquote win the fight. If that's your experience, it is valid. There's no arguing. That experience is accurate for you. So it's very easy to get into this kind of pattern of thinking is that, well, all I need to do is just go nuts and start, jumping up and down, doing all that kind of stuff and puffing my chest and being in his face and so on. And I'm going to intimidate him. Now, over the years, you've seen me share dozens, if not hundreds of videos of this kind of behavior in a real life situation where somebody is either basically doing that to sucker punch the other guy to make him back down and the sucker punch is ready to go, or somebody on the receiving end of that and either doesn't see it coming or actually uses it against the aggressive person. And that's what I wanted to point out with that kind of behavior, is that when that is what you think is the best solution, the best course of action, when you are in some sort of potentially violent situation that is escalating, you should understand that tactically speaking, it's not really a great idea. And this can backfire if that is your experience. You recognize a pattern of, like, if I do that most of the time, it ends well for me. It's very easy to get into that kind of mindset in which that, well, it will therefore always be true. It's very human to think like that, or to just subconsciously assume that this would be the case. Let's flip it over to the other side, to the person on the receiving end of that. If you're not used to somebody being in your face and being overly aggressive like that, it can be very intimidating and you can end up not seeing that sucker punch coming. But what if you are? What if you do have the knowledge and experience to see that for what it is? It is anything but actually attacking you. As long as he's making all that noise, kicking inanimate objects, hopefully not getting caught for him, hopefully for him, I mean, taking his clothes off, which you may or may not want to actually see what's underneath his clothes. But doing all that kind of stuff, he's not actively attacking you. He's not landing any shots. He's not punching. He's not kicking. He's not using a weapon. He's maybe preparing to do that, most likely, but he's not actively doing that, which means that you have time. Again, like I said, time is measured in fractions of seconds. So him doing that buys you time to make good decisions, at the very least on a tactical level. What does that mean? When somebody is pushing his chest forward and wants to come nose to nose with you, I mean, they are in striking range. At that range, typically the first person to attack will land that shot. And if you can make it count, that's pretty much the end of the encounter right there. Or at the very least, it sets up your second shot, your second technique, and so on. And he never gets to recover. Like I remember Monty's Law that I've mentioned before, it's never the other guy's turn. That is an effective mindset and good tactics when it comes to self-defense. Or when he is pulling his shirt over his head, well, that's the time you can run away. I mean, you don't even have to be an incredibly fast runner, but you'll have a head start. And if you run in a direction that he doesn't immediately see you going, he's going to have to reacquire you as a target first before he can start running himself. Buys you time to get away. And if for whatever reason that is not enough, or you can't do that, you can't really run that fast, okay, well, give him a good push as he pulls his t-shirt over his head or his shirt. If you're lucky, he's going to fall ass over tea kettle to the floor, and he's going to be a jumbled mess of clothing and arms and head, and he's going to be preoccupied with getting that shirt off and basically freeing up his head again so you can see where you are. By that time, you should already have quite the lead start and be relatively far away before you can give chase. Or if the situation requires it, that's when you can actually strike. Whether it is punching, kicking, throwing, tripping, whatever it may be, using a weapon, depending on the context, depending on the self-defense laws that are in effect where you are, you can make a sound tactical choice of engaging him as he is in no position to do much about it. When he's pulling his clothes over his head, that's a good moment. When he does something incredibly tactically stupid as trying to intimidate you by kicking a gate and getting stuck, that's the moment to do all these things. Expecting, and then the other side of that coin, expecting that every single person who behaves like that is tactically stupid is maybe a little bit over the top. That is you looking at a pattern and thinking that is all there is to the pattern. There are people out there who use that specifically to lure you into certain actions so that they can use those against you. For instance, they might be going all angry and puffy chest and all that kind of stuff, cussing at you, just so you don't pay attention to their buddy sneaking up behind you. And there are many more situations like that that you can imagine with just a little bit of experience and imagination. So just because there's one guy in front of you, don't just assume that he's a tactical fool who you can easily take out. You might have to, watch your six as you do that, to put it mildly. You should do it anyway. But again, assumptions based on patterns of behavior that you've observed repeatedly, they are often accurate, and they are, you can call it shorthand. It's a quick rule of thumb that allows you to make quick decisions, typically good, but that shouldn't close your eyes to the possibility that something else is happening. As always, there are no guarantees when it comes to violence. You can look at a situation beforehand, and until the actual violence is happening, until the fighting, so to speak, starts, there's no way to predict when exactly who will do what specifically. There's guidelines, there's experience, but there's no certainty. Nobody can predict the future. So you try to do the best you can with the knowledge you have, but always maintain a little bit of an edge so that you can adapt on the fly as is needed when it turns out your prediction was wrong and the other guy does something else. I often call this be engaged to your techniques, don't be married to them. What I mean with that is that when you do a technique, you have to have commitment in it. You have to mean it, if you will, and try to effectively land a technique. But you should also be able to change your mind and leave the technique, which is a bride in this case, leave her at the altar just before you say, yes, I do, you change your mind. It takes a fair bit of commitment to get to the altar with somebody, so you don't want to do it all the time. But what you want to have is the ability to, when something goes wrong and it goes against your expectations, that you can adapt on the fly and do what is suddenly abundantly clear you should have been doing from the get-go. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. We all make assessments that turn out to be wrong. So train accordingly. Add plan B, plan C, and so on. What do I do when this fails? Well, figure it out in training before you need it. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about. Again, I'll put a link to this video in the Facebook group. As always, many people listen to these episodes and want to join. You are obviously more than welcome. Caveat, you have to agree to the rules when you join. If you don't agree, I don't let you in. Simple as that. Second caveat, when you join, read the pinned post on top of the Facebook group, which explains a little bit more, which you have to read that as well, so that we can all get along and avoid conflicts and just failures to communicate. There are so many people from all parts of the world in that group, so communication can easily go wrong on the internet. I want to avoid that. So stick to the rules, agree to them, and then you can join the fun there. As always, you found this episode useful. Thank you very much. If you would be so kind as to hit the like button, share, subscribe, and so on. That always helps out tremendously. And I have to say it. You guys know I have to say it. Join me on Patreon. This is the 5th year on Patreon. There's hundreds of videos and posts and bonus podcasts there. So lots of unique content. You can't find it anywhere else. That definitely supports the show as well. What's coming up next? I am setting up several interviews. So some of these interviews are geared towards living in a world that is in crisis. The economical crisis is upon us in Europe. We have got the energy crisis hitting hard. So I'm looking to talk to people who can talk about that from a perspective of having experienced that firsthand. And on the other hand, the regular interviews will continue as well. I'm again trying to set up some interviews with people I've had on the show before, but also some new people that you might find interesting to listen to. Next up is the interview I did with Kelly Sayre. She specializes in situational awareness, and we had a great talk. The second time for her to be on the show. And there's also a bonus podcast episode with her, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoy that too. All right, that's it for this episode and the updates. As always, thank you for listening, and talk to you next time. Bye.